seeing a big glow, but it's way over. It looks like probably Gatlinburg.
As an FCC licensed, incident command trained, and self-funded auxiliary communicator volunteer, I was asked to provide temporary mobile communications to the Red Cross shelter in the Gatlinburg, Tennessee fire incident. Because of the severity of that disaster, my 4-hour shift morphed into a full-blown 18-hour volunteer deployment. I came back from Gatlinburg having witnessed firsthand the failure of communication systems that citizens and emergency response teams have come to rely on. It bothered me so much that I started praying about, should I try to offer a solution? I went on and filed the paperwork to start Off-Grid Oxcom Radio Club, and over the last couple years we've been able to add members along the way. And we want to assist first responders and emergency managers any way we can.
You know, we need to take care of our neighbor, and we need to take care of ourselves to be able to do that. We have to be prepared. So we know that in end times we're going to have earthquakes, we're going to have floods, we're going to have tornadoes, we're going to have other things that go wrong, wars, and we've seen it ourselves right here. So preparedness is of the utmost importance. We've got to be ready, and part of our getting ready is being able to communicate.
I spent 22 years in the Air Force, where I was both a weather officer and a personnel officer. And I also had the opportunity to earn a Master's of Science in Strategic Intelligence. And some of the things that I learned during that time about communication bring some value to what our squad does. We have basically three tiers of communication. One is we have the ability to provide voice communication when other forms of voice communication are down. Second, we have the ability to provide digital communications. Using small computers and our radios, we're able to communicate. And third, we have what are some people call the original form of text messages, which is CW or Morse code.
In a large-scale emergency situation, the need for medical expertise is almost a given. It's very important to have people on hand who have both the capability of operating auxiliary communication equipment and the education to interface seamlessly with doctors.
As a medical professional, it's extremely important to pass a message clearly, concisely, and correctly. For instance, the difference between pentobarbital and phenobarbital can be life-changing, even fatal.
In an emergency situation, as ham radio operators, it's important that we deliver messages reliably and error-free. Its core depends on a repetition of message from the receiving end back to the transmitting end so that both ends can confirm that they have the same message.
Message from Dr. Smith, Stanley Jones, Manager Shelter 1, make patient 14.
Hi, I'm Eddie, K4TYS. For the past 40 years, I've been an amateur radio operator, and I've had the good fortune to be on the government side of the house as well. And I can tell you how important it is to have that public-private partnership. When all systems are offline, such as during Hurricane Katrina, amateur radio was the only thing still operating. Amateur operators came to the aid of the local people and first responders to restore those vital links that are impossible to do otherwise. Amateur radio does not depend on internal infrastructure.
Our nation relies on a network of critical infrastructure that delivers all the essential services of modern life, from the water we drink to the food we eat, the fuel in our vehicles, the internet services we use, even that voice on the other end of the phone call. The electric power system, or the grid, is the most essential of all the critical infrastructure systems because it is the system upon which all of the other systems rely to execute their missions. It's not an exaggeration to say that the electric grid is truly the umbilical cord of modern life. But today, the grid is vulnerable to a suite of natural hazards and malevolent threats that have the ability to propel us into a scenario that to this point we've seen only in the movies. The good news is that there are a variety of steps that we can take to prepare ourselves and our communities for such events. But preparing for such events requires us to step well outside of our normal planning horizon. This is the reason that the Off-Grid OxComm Radio Club exists, to develop and implement the essential communications capabilities that will work in the most challenging of circumstances, including circumstances in which the grid is down or normal.
Just as a beating heart is fundamental to bodily health, the ability to communicate is fundamental to disaster relief and recovery efforts. When normal systems fail, amateur radio emergency communications can help. Let's let Barry explain.
We're going to talk just briefly about cross-band repeater operation. These radios are generally the first piece of equipment a ham operator is going to buy. They're small, they're portable, they're lightweight. Often they are water resistant, and they handle VHF and UHF communications. But they do have limitations. After all, they're only 5 watts. And if you think about a 5-watt piece of communications equipment, it's not going to go very far. When we think about East Tennessee, for example, we've got mountains, high ridges, and in downtown Knoxville, for example, where we support the Knoxville Marathon, we've got a lot of tall buildings. And these radios don't perform well with those obstacles. So what do? Especially in an emergency communication situation, we have a resolution. It's called cross-band repeater. Cross-band simply means that we're sending information on one band and it is repeating on another band, but it may put out as much as 50 watts of power. So with cross-band repeating, we can dramatically increase our range from this to the power of a mobile radio and get over those mountains, get over those ridges, get around those tall buildings. And we have exponentially increased our ability to communicate in an emergency situation.
As a retired college professor, I'm very interested in teaching the younger folks the technology involved in off-grid communications. Through OGARC, I will have a platform to present and demonstrate this technology to the younger generations. I'd like for you to meet some of them.
When we talk about Tier 2 communications, we're talking about WinLink. WinLink is a method of sending email over radios. A great example of that would be if we had a power outage that included communications in the Tennessee Valley, say due to an earthquake, we could, with our existing equipment, send a WinLink message to another station, say in Halifax or Florida or Boston, that has internet available to it, and get that email out onto the internet. Another form of Tier 2 communications is FLDIGI NBEMS. NBEMS stands for Narrowband Emergency Messages System. On the screen you'll see the FLDIGI interface, and separate from that I can bring up the FLMSG software. FLMSG allows us to create ICS 213 forms just like we would do in WinLink and transmit those. And it's a broadcast where we can hit 20 different locations at one time instead of a point-to-point. One of the big advantages of using digital communications is we can be in an environment like this, it's an office environment, or we can be on the tailgate of a pickup truck out in the field, or even on a picnic table. We can do all of the same things in any of those locations in any environment that we're needed.
One thing we're trying to accomplish in our off-grid squad is to have as many modes available as we might need in any emergency situation. One of the benefits of Morse code or CW transmission is that it doesn't take a lot to make an actual transmitter. So it takes less equipment, and in emergencies you do not need a lot of power. A small amount of power, 1 watt, 5 watts, will reach a long way. A wire antenna is all that we need. I have literally worked countries on the opposite side of the earth using this wire antenna.
When you're called out into the field and something breaks and you have to keep communications up, it's good to be able to know that you have the resources, keep communications so that people can stay in contact with emergency services. Our off-grid club has fabricated solar panels out of aluminum so that we can have solar power to recharge our batteries. We rely on generators that power our welders in case we need generator power. We try to have every possible option available to us so that we can stay live on the air in times of emergency. We build what we need if we have to in the field in order to keep things going.
Hi, I'm Captain Mark Slaughter, United States Marine Corps. I'm working here at the State Department right now. I'm a current Marine Air Ground Task Force Intelligence Officer, a former Signals Intelligence Officer stationed out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I've been a ham for about 5 years. I got into ham radio as it related to my job. Again, I was a Signals Intelligence Officer, so the understanding of the RF spectrum and how radio waves work lended credibility to me in my career, and it became a hobby. It became a lot of fun. So the value of having an organization of people who are able to communicate in any condition at a moment's notice with the placing of a phone call, presuming that the phones actually work, it's absolutely invaluable. And we want to be that as an organization. We want to be that group that is called upon to serve in a communications capacity when everything else doesn't work.
Talk to your local ham clubs and work out a plan to include them in your disaster recovery efforts.